get this, we're diving into a story that honestly feels like it's straight out of a movie. We've got the dark web, we've got Bitcoin, presidential pardons, and a whole lot of controversy. You want the inside scoop on Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road? Well, you've come to the right place. We've got news articles, we've even got personal pleas about his case. So let's unpack this, shall we?
What really strikes me about this whole thing is how Ulbricht's story isn't just some event that happened in the past, It's like a preview of the struggles that we're facing right now, today, with technology, freedom, and all those unintended consequences of innovation.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was actually convicted for running a platform that was used for, well, illegal drug sales. But then he gets pardoned by President Trump, no less, with a ton of support from, like, libertarians and crypto folks. So was Ulbricht just a straight-up criminal mastermind, or was he an idealistic entrepreneur who got hit way too hard? And what's the deal with the pardon after spending years, literal years, behind bars? Let's dive in and find out.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this whole controversy, we need to rewind a bit and go back to the Silk Road itself. Imagine, if you will, a digital marketplace, completely hidden away in the shadowy corners of the internet, operating on, you guessed it, the dark web.
Oh, yeah, the dark web. It sounds so mysterious and maybe even a little bit scary. But before we get totally lost in the digital darkness here, can you give us like a quick overview of what the Silk Road actually was?
Yeah, sure. It was essentially, at its core, an online marketplace, but with a twist. It was used to buy and sell all sorts of things, but it quickly became infamous for illegal drugs. And here's where it gets even wilder.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Silk Road was like a pioneer in using Bitcoin for large-scale transactions. And this is way before Bitcoin was on everyone's radar. Ulbricht and his platform, they were at the forefront of this whole thing, demonstrating how cryptocurrency could be used for anonymous transactions. No wonder it sent shockwaves through governments and regulators.
Wow, talk about being ahead of the curve. So in a way, he was kind of like a tech visionary, even if it was for, well, less than legal purposes.
Precisely, and that's exactly what makes this whole thing so incredibly fascinating. You have this incredibly innovative technology being used in a way that basically challenges all our traditional ideas about commerce, law, and control.
Okay, so we've got this hidden online marketplace, right? And it's fueled by this then unknown thing called Bitcoin. But what about the man at the center of it all? Was Ulbricht more like a tech-savvy Robin Hood, or more like, I don't know, a digital Walter White?
Well, the picture that we get from your sources is, well, it's pretty complex. The prosecution, they went all out, portraying him as this mastermind driven by pure greed, holding him responsible for drug sales that they claimed, allegedly, led to deaths.
They even tried to claim that he tried to hire hitmen to silence, threats to his operation, though that never actually stuck, right?
Yeah. Exactly, you're right. It's super important to note that those particular charges were never actually proven. But then on the flip side, you have Ulbricht's defense and his supporters who paint a very different picture. They argue that he was actually just a young idealist who believed in free markets and privacy. They say his punishment was totally over the top and that he was unfairly targeted by, get this, corrupt agents.
And there's this whole Free Ross movement, right, driven mainly by his family. And they present him as this, idealistic libertarian who is just super passionate about individual freedom and limited government. This is all sounding very complex.
And you know what? That libertarian philosophy is actually key to understanding the whole Silk Road thing. See, the site actually banned anything that would directly harm someone else. Things like child pornography, stolen goods, or violence, all of that was strictly prohibited. Ulbricht truly believed that he was creating a platform for free exchange where individuals could make their own choices without the government, stepping in.
So it's like he envisioned this online utopia where everyone could buy and sell whatever they wanted, no questions asked. But, maybe with some rules against, actually harming others.
Exactly. And that's precisely where the friction comes in, right? It raises all these questions about the limits of freedom, especially in the online world. How do you create a space where individuals have autonomy without, at the same time, enabling harmful activities? It's a huge dilemma that we're still grappling with today.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see why this case is so controversial. But here's something I find really interesting. One of the sources you gave me, a study from Carnegie Mellon University, found that the most popular item sold on Silk Road was, wait for it, marijuana. And often in small amounts, for personal use.
That's right. And it really makes you wonder how differently things might have played out if the Silk Road had emerged in a world where marijuana was legal, like it is in many places now.
Totally. It makes you think about the changing legal and social landscape, right? And how it influences our perceptions of these online platforms. So we've got this complicated picture of Ulbricht tech, innovator, convicted criminal, maybe a mix of both. But then things take a sharp turn when Donald Trump enters the scene with that presidential pardon.
Yeah, which, as you can imagine, just poured gasoline on an already raging fire.
Right. Trump called Ulbricht's sentence ridiculous, and he even compared Ulbricht's prosecution to his own legal troubles. It was like something straight out of a political thriller.
And, in a post on Truth Social, Trump specifically mentioned that he was pardoning Ulbricht as like, a nod to the libertarian movement, the one that supported him. So, yeah, the political context of this whole thing, it's pretty hard to ignore.
Yeah, it's like he was playing to his base, right? Sending a clear message about government overreach and individual liberty. And it definitely struck a chord with a lot of people, especially those libertarian and crypto communities, the ones who saw Ulbricht as like a symbol of their own values.
Absolutely. It's a classic example of how a pardon can become a lightning rod for these bigger political debates. Was it like an act of justice? Was it a calculated political move? Or maybe a bit of both. There's no easy answer, which honestly makes it all the more fascinating.
It definitely stirred up some strong reactions on both sides. I remember seeing those news clips, with Republicans praising the pardon and Democrats condemning it, calling it a slap in the face to families who'd been affected by drug overdoses.
Right, and some Democrats even went on Twitter, like calling Trump out for pardoning a drug trafficking kingpin. It really highlights just how deeply divided people were, and probably still are, on this case. But putting the pardon aside for a moment, Ulbricht's story doesn't end there, right? The guy spent over a decade behind bars. What was that like? How did he spend his time? And what has he been up to since being released?
Yeah, over 10 years in prison. That's a long time. And according to freeross.org, which is run by his family, he actually made some pretty big efforts to, turn his life around while he was inside. They say he was a model prisoner, even teaching classes and leading support groups for other inmates. He even started an art initiative to raise money for charity.
Oh, that's right. I read about that. He taught science and math classes, led yoga and meditation sessions, and even acted as, a mediator in his unit. Sounds like he was actively trying to, to have a positive impact on his environment, even within the confines of prison.
Yeah, it really sounds like he was trying to make up for the harm caused by the Silk Road, especially with that Art for Giving program you mentioned. Selling his artwork to raise funds for prisoner support and drug harm reduction charities. I mean, that's a pretty powerful statement.
It definitely is. And Ulbricht himself has expressed remorse for his actions.
Yeah.
Like in a letter to President Biden back in 2022, he wrote, I am no longer the type of man who could break the law and let down so many.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy quote. And there's another quote from him, I think it's on the Free Ross website, where he talks about learning from his mistakes and wanting to use his experience to help others.
It really makes you think about redemption, doesn't it? Can someone who commits, serious crimes genuinely change and deserve a second chance?
And what does a second chance even look like for someone like Ulbricht? He's a free man now, but he's still carrying the weight of this incredibly complex and controversial past.
Absolutely. And he's stepping back into a world that's dramatically different from the one he left behind, The internet has evolved, technology has advanced, and those debates about online privacy and freedom are even more heated than they were back then.
So where do we even begin to unpack all of this? We've explored the Silk Road, the rise and fall of Ross Ulbricht, the controversial pardon, and his apparent efforts at rehabilitation. What are the key takeaways here?
I think at its core, Ulbricht's story is a paradox. He was a convicted criminal who facilitated illegal activities, but he was also this symbol of internet freedom who sparked these really crucial conversations about the limits of government control.
It's like he represents this clash between the ideals of a free and open internet, right? And the realities of a world where online actions have very real-world consequences.
Exactly. And his story just brings up so many questions that are still relevant today, even more so now. Questions about technology's role in society, the balance between individual liberty and collective safety, and the unintended consequences of innovation.
It also makes you think about how different groups can look at the same person and see totally different things. Villain, victim, martyr, even a cautionary tale.
It's fascinating how these narratives can be shaped by political agendas, media coverage, and just personal beliefs.
It's clear that even though Ulbricht himself is now free, the questions that his case raised are far from settled.
Yeah, in many ways, they're even more pressing now. I mean, with technology constantly evolving, could something like Silk Road reappear, just, in a new form? We've seen the rise of new dark web marketplaces, the explosion of cryptocurrencies, and online anonymity tools that are becoming even more sophisticated.
And we're still wrestling with those new challenges around online privacy, data security, and the spread of misinformation.
It's like Ulbricht's story was just a glimpse into the dilemmas we're going to face in the future as technology keeps pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It really feels like Ulbricht's story wasn't just like some isolated incident, but a sign of things to come. It's almost like he was like a canary in the coal mine,
Yeah.
warning us about the challenges of this crazy, rapidly evolving digital world.
It's a powerful analogy. And just like those miners needed to pay attention to the canary's warning, we need to really understand the lessons embedded in Ulbricht's story, because those questions about freedom, security, innovation, responsibility, they're only going to become more urgent as technology advances.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road, we're not just left with answers. We're left with a whole new set of questions. And honestly, that's what makes this whole story so captivating. It's not just some like historical footnote. It's a living, breathing dilemma that, that we're all grappling with.
It forces us to confront the complexities of, of our relationship with technology and to recognize that there are often no easy solutions. It's about finding that delicate balance between individual freedom and collective well-being in a world where the lines are constantly shifting.
It's definitely a lot to consider, but I think that's the point of these deep dives, isn't it? To challenge ourselves, to think critically, to engage with these complex issues
Yeah.
and to form like our own informed opinions.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe you'll even discover some unexpected connections and insights along the way. That's the beauty of exploration and learning. You never know where it might lead you.
So until next time, keep those minds curious, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep into those topics that, that really spark your imagination.